So a couple years ago, I was our church hosted Triple X Church. Ever heard of Triple X Church? And so I had the opportunity to get to know Jake Larson, who is one of the guys that helped Craig Gross start Triple X Church. Craig's kind of the bigger of the two, but Jake was the guy who came and spoke at our church. And so, hey, it was kind of a cool opportunity. I got a chance to meet him and take him out to eat and hang out with him a little bit. And the subject of accountability came up, and this whole idea of being in an accountability relationship, accountability partners, small groups, just different things like that. And told me a story that was real recent for him at the time, right before he was out of California at the time, right before he had flown, to be with us. He had got together, had a guy call him in his church and say, hey, can we get together and talk? I got some issues going on in my life, and so they got together, went to Panera, were sitting there, drinking a cup of coffee or whatever, and the guy was like, dude, he's like, I'm in trouble. He's like, I'm in major trouble. And Jake's like, what's going on? And he's like, well, I just got busted by the FBI. They found child pornography on my computer. And he's like, I'm gonna go to jail. He's like, this is like big time problems, and he's like, they found a lot, and in the state of California, it's criminal offense, and he was looking at like serious jail time, a couple decades, and it's like a businessman in the community, well respected, married, had kids, the whole deal. Hadn't told his wife yet, hadn't told his kids yet. Nobody knew, nobody knew that this guy had a major issue going on in his life. And Jake said to him, he said, dude, he's like, he's like, how did this happen? Like, how did you not, like, don't you have any friends that you can talk to about this? Anybody that could help you, anybody that could hold you accountable? And the guy's like, yeah, dude. He's like, I got tons of great friends. He's like, I'm part of a men's small group. He's like, we meet every single week, and we talk with one another and pray with each other. And he's like, we meet right here in this Panera, actually, right over there in that corner. He's like, once a week in the morning, we come together, we get together for breakfast and talk and share. And Jake's like, so, he's like, do you guys talk about these kind of issues? Like, just, are you guys, talk about things like pornography and stuff like that? And he's like, yeah, you talk about it all the time. He's like, do they ever ask questions? Like, hey, are you like having a problem? And he's like, yeah, they ask me every week. Jake's like, what did you say to him? He's like, I just tell him I'm fine, And Jake's like, but you're not. And the guy's like, no, And so anytime I think about this topic of accountability, that story pops in my head because at the end of all of it, when you talk about accountability, it's always a choice. And, so you have an assignment for this semester, iron sharpens iron, partners. Obviously, that's a verse out of Proverbs, as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. And so, yeah, you got to get together 10 times with somebody, and you got to have ISI meetings. And tonight we'll talk about accountability, and we'll talk about different ways that you can have meetings, different kind of conversations that you can have, and different questions that you can use. And your notes, like the last 4 or 5 pages of your notes, are just full of question after question after question after question, and we're not going to talk about those questions. They're really just there as a resource for you. But at the end of all of it, the reality is you and I both choose whether we really want to be accountable. To a friend, to a spouse, to a fiance, to a pastor, to a teacher, to a coach, whoever the people are in your life that you trust enough or have those kind of relationships with. Ultimately, it's always a choice. Do you really want to be accountable? Do you really want to open up? Do you really want to take the armor off? Whatever metaphor or image you want to put over it. Do you really want to be accountable? You can be in groups. You can go through 10 sessions with an ISI partner this semester and never really be totally honest about stuff that's going on in your life. And one of my mentors and somebody that I've had the opportunity to meet and be coached by is Jeannie Mayo, and some of you might know that name, some of you don't. It doesn't really matter whether you know her or not. But she, and I don't think this is in your notes anywhere, and this might be something you want to write down, but one of the things that she said to me and said to guys that are in ministry, and so I'll pass this on to you, is this quote, and it always sticks with me. And she says, the devil reserves the right to expose your sin at his most opportune time to do the most damage possible to the kingdom of God. The devil reserves the right to expose your sin at the most opportune time to do the most damage to the kingdom of God. And we could spend tons of time talking about people that have failed in ministry. I could ask for a show of hands right now, and there's probably a good chance that 90% or higher of the number of us in the room would raise our hands and say, I know somebody personally, or am 1 or 2 degrees of separation away from somebody who failed in ministry, who had a moral failure of some sort. And we can talk all day long about accountability. We can talk about it till we're blue in the face. But at the end of the day, it always comes back to you and I just choosing, do I really want to be real and really want to be honest about whatever my issues are, whatever my junk is? And we all have it. Like we're just fooling ourselves. And the Bible makes that clear. We've all sinned and fall short of the glory of God. All of our righteousness is as filthy rags, so on and so on. You throw any verse out there that you want to. You guys sit in chapel enough and you sit in classes enough and you probably read your Bible enough to know that you're not perfect, hopefully. You figured that out already. But the reality is when it comes to accountability, and the subject matter tonight is that we're all going to make a choice. And I'm going to give you a lot of good ideas tonight. I'm going to give you a lot of great questions tonight and a lot of different ways in which you can meet with someone and choose to be accountable. And there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. And you can do it in the context of small groups. You can do it in the context of one-on-one relationships with people. You can do it in the context of a spouse if you're married, and things like that, or a coach, a pastor, a teacher, somebody. But the reality is you and I have to choose. Do you, do I, do we want to be accountable? Is that something that we really want in our life? Or do we want to play games and try to get away with it as long as we can? And I think what happens in ministry a lot, and know what happens in ministry a lot, from my own personal experience and from hearing way too many stories of friends that I went to Bible college with right here at this school that ended up having moral failures, is that many times we hide our issues, we hide our junk, we try to deal with it on our own. We tell ourselves that we can get over it, we can work through it. We're different than everybody else. Our problems aren't the same as everyone else's problems, and we say we'll buck the curve. We won't be the next one. And I could tell you story after story, and I could tell you, my best friend in college, we were best friends for years, came in as freshmen together, and we were as close as any relationship that I've ever been a part of, and was hiding all kinds of stuff. Ended up getting kicked out of school my senior year, came back, graduated, went off to ministry, everything was great. A couple years into being a youth pastor, had an affair with 2 girls in the youth group. How does that happen? What? And we hear stories about that now, and we hear the stories about Jake Larson. Like, how does that happen? And it happens because somebody at some point decided, I don't want to be accountable. I don't want help. I want to try to work on things all by myself. And then the enemy of our soul, who goes around, the Bible says, like a roaring lion, right? And what does the Bible describe us as? As sheep who have gone astray. So sheep versus lion. Lion wins every time, right? So what happens is the enemy of our soul waits, and this goes back to this quote that I just gave you, waits until the most opportune time. And see, this is the reason why we get so confused when we see people that have been in ministry for 5 and 10 and 15 and 20 and 30 and 40 years, and then all of a sudden it comes out. And we're baffled. How in the world? How is that guy a senior pastor of a church of X amount of thousands of people, and then all of a sudden it happens? Why? Why does it happen that way? How did it not come out when he was young and in Bible college, or before he ever went into ministry, and so on and so on? And I think it goes back to that quote, that the devil looks at our weaknesses and he looks at our junk and he just says, I'll just wait until he's got that really great thing happening in his youth ministry, and kids are coming like crazy, and he's grown a youth ministry from 12 kids to 100 kids in 1 year. I'll just wait. because I can take a whole bunch. I don't want to take. See, the devil just doesn't want to take out you and just take out me. He wants to take out everybody that we've influenced along the journey. And you guys are all old enough, and you probably remember the shock that went through the kingdom of God when Ted Haggard had his moral failure at New Life out in Colorado. And I want to read a couple parts of the letter that he wrote to his church, and this was at the time a church, I think, of, I don't know, it was like over 10,000. I don't know the exact number, but obviously it was huge. And I'm not going to read the whole letter because it's kind of long. I just want to read a couple parts of it because I just think that it's just a good wake-up call for all of us. Before I get into the ins and outs of accountability, again, you and I have to make a decision. Do you want to be accountable? Because if you don't want to, you can play the game. We're all really, really good at playing the game, right? We're great at hiding stuff. We're all pros at that. And so at the end of the day, we have to decide whether we want to take the mask off and take the armor off and just be like, boom, here's the real me. Here's what I'm wrestling with. Help me. And so here's a couple of thoughts from his letter. He says, Dear New Life Church family, I am so sorry. I am sorry for the disappointment, the betrayal, and the hurt. I'm sorry for the horrible example that I have set for all of you. I have an overwhelming, all-consuming sadness in my heart for the pain that you and I and my family have experienced over the past few days, and I am so sorry for the circumstances that have caused shame and embarrassment to you all. I am a deceiver and a liar, and there is a part of my life that is so repulsive and dark that I've been warring against it all of my adult life. For extended periods of time, I would enjoy victory and rejoice in freedom, and then from time to time, the dirt that I thought was gone would resurface, and I would find myself thinking thoughts and experiencing desires that were contrary to everything that I believe and teach. The public person I wasn't a lie, it was just incomplete. And when I stopped communicating about my problems, focus on that right there. When I stopped communicating about my problems, the darkness increased and finally dominated me. And as a result, I did things that were contrary to everything that I believe. And I won't read it all, and obviously, if you know, there's a lot to it, and you can find it online somewhere if you want to read it. I can give you a copy of it. But I read that one section, and I have it highlighted here in my notes when he says, when I stopped communicating about the things I was struggling with, the darkness began to overwhelm me. And it reminds me of a missionary who once told the story of a tribal leader that was learning about faith and learning about having a relationship with God, and was trying to describe to the missionary this emotional feeling that was going on inside of him. And the only way he could think to describe it was, he said to the missionary, he said, I feel like there are two wild dogs inside of me, and they're waging war against one another, and I don't know which one is going to win. And the missionary said to him, well, it's simple. Whichever one you feed the most is the dog that's going to win. And that's true in my life and in your life. And it's true when it comes to the dark areas of our life versus the areas that are in right standing with God. Whatever area you feed the most is the area that's going to ultimately dominate. And it might take years for the darkness to dominate, but the devil's willing to wait. The enemy of your soul is willing to wait. And for good reason, so he can do the most damage possible. So let's talk about accountability. And let's first of all talk about what accountability relationships are not, because I think there's probably just some general, I think we all kind of have like maybe a little built-in general defense mechanism when we hear the idea of you need to be in a relationship that you're accountable to. And so we'll try to dispel some of the myths about that first and just, kind of say, here's what it is not. And then we'll talk a little bit about what it is, and then we'll talk about why it's important. And then we'll just talk about a couple of different ways that you can have accountable relationships, and different ways that you can communicate with people. And that section you'll kind of pick and choose probably what feels the best for you. So accountability relationships are not mean-spirited manipulators. It's not having somebody in your life that is critical and is judgmental and is trying to manipulate you in order to get you to reveal things that you don't want to reveal, or get you to do things that you don't want to do. It's not this domineering, I'm going to dominate you type manipulate you type relationships. It is not a controlling leader. It's not a leader or a pastor or a teacher or a coach or a parent in your life who's trying to control every aspect of your life, who's trying to know every single detail of everything that's going on. And letter C, it's not a relentless observer. It's not someone who's following you around and stalking you on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and watching your every move and coming up to you after a sports game or a movie or this or that. You did this, I've been watching. That's not the spirit. That's not the goal of having accountable relationships. What they are, accountable relationships are affirming without judging. You and I, we already have enough judgment going on in our life. There's enough criticism that's already happening. You don't need another person in your life to judge you and to criticize you and to tear you down. But you do need somebody to affirm you and to affirm you in what's good and what's right about your life and about your faith and your walk with God, but also to affirm you in areas that you need to grow in. I remember years ago, I think I had been at Glad Tidings for maybe 2 or 3 years at the time, and I just knew that I needed somebody in my life to be a coach. I knew that I needed help, basically. And it wasn't just help in the sense of spiritual things that were going on in my life. I just needed a coach. I needed a youth ministry coach. And so I met this guy, Darren Heilman was his name. He at the time was the youth ministry specialist here at Valley Forge. He was Pastor Phil's predecessor, and I got to meet him. And over the years, we became really, really good friends. And one night we were out to eat, and I was talking, I was just kind of venting about life and ministry and things that I was frustrated about, and kind of got to the topic of some of my youth leaders at the time, and I was being pretty harsh towards some of my volunteers and just things I wasn't happy about and their level of commitment and just different things that were happening. I don't remember all the circumstances. I don't remember all the events that were transpiring. I just knew I was frustrated, and so I was just talking, and he was listening, and he just was sitting there and we got, all of a sudden I kind of stopped and he looked at me and he was like, all right. He's like, are we friends? I was like, yeah. He's like, no, are we really good friends? I was like, yeah. He's like, can I just be honest with you? Can I just be real with you? And I was like, yeah, please. He's like, all right, I'm going to say something. He said, I don't want to hurt your feelings. I want to get you all mad, but I think there's something you need to hear. I was like, all right. And he looked me in the eye and he said, you know what your problem is? He said, your problem is that you love your youth program more than you love people. He said, you're loving your youth program and you're using people. He's like, you need to learn how to love people and use a program. And it was just one of those light bulb moments, aha, / stab in the heart, you're right. And, it was affirming at the same time though. What does Proverbs tell us about words that can be trusted? The words of a brother can be trusted even when they hurt. And so that's what I mean when I say that it's affirming without judging. Because when we think of judging, we automatically think of the criticism and the judgment and someone that's putting us down and someone that's making us feel worse than we already feel. And no one wants that. Who wants that? I don't want that. I don't want that kind of accountability. The last thing you want in an accountability relationship is dude, I'm going to tell him the truth and he's going to hammer me and she's going to hate me and they're going to beat me up and they're going to make me feel worse than I already feel. And you already feel bad enough inside because deep down inside you already know you're failing, or you already know you have a major weakness, right? But you want someone that's going to help you through that. And so for me, that was one of the best accountable type relationships that I've ever had, and one of the most affirming type relationships where it was I knew that his words could be trusted, even if those words hurt. They were still affirming me to do the right thing and to make changes that needed to be made. Letter B, accountability relationships are able to ask tough questions in love. And you're going to see that here towards the end of this lesson here. There's tons of questions, just tons and tons of questions. And some of them are okay, and some of them are just tough, and they're tough questions. And you want to have in your life, you need to have in your life somebody who's able to ask you the tough questions. Someone who's able to look you in the eye and ask you questions that no one else can ask. someone who knows you well enough to know when you're lying to them, or when you're not being completely honest with them about the answer that you've just given, for the question. And it comes questions in love. Batterson says something a lot, and I know he was just here in chapel, and I was like bummed, like, why didn't I go to chapel? But and it was so funny, and it was so funny because we just started the Circle Maker series in our church, and so like the message that he preached on Tuesday is the one that I just preached on Sunday. Obviously, it was his message, not mine. But like some of the Valley Forge students who are from my youth ministry were texted me, and they're like, "Hey, Mark Batterson just preached the same sermon you preached on Sunday," and I was like, "Dude, he so ripped me off. Like he stole my sermon." but he said something in one of his books or blogs or something like that fits in right here with this whole idea of asking tough questions in love. And the Bible says that we are to be people of truth and love. People of truth and love. And the way he kind of broke it down, I thought it was really great, was truth means I'm going to tell you the truth no matter what. But love says I'm going to love you no matter what. And that's the kind of balance that you're looking for when it comes to who's going to be my accountability partner, who's my iron sharpens iron friend. It's somebody who has that perfect balance of I love you enough to tell you the truth, no matter how much it hurts, but I'm going to love you just as much. I have the perfect balance of truth. See, sometimes we just love sometimes it's funny. We don't want to always be in an accountability type relationship, but we're totally fine with people being accountable to us. So we're totally fine with telling people the truth. I will tell you the truth. I will so tell you what's wrong with you and be happy to do it. But we don't, you know what I mean? But we don't always want to be on the receiving end of that. And the reason why is because sometimes we're not with somebody that we know at the end of the day they love us unconditionally just as much as they're willing to tell us the truth. Sometimes we get those two mixed up too, because some of you have friends in your life that you're like, oh, they are my absolute best friend in the world, but you've never really told them the truth. See, you've got some people that you're really, really close with, and you know what some of their issues are, and you know some of the junk that they're wrestling with because you've seen it, or you've observed it, or they've said enough for you to kind of have a glimpse of what's really going on in their life. But you say you love them, but you don't really love them enough to tell them the truth. See, so it's kind of funny because everyone falls into different things on different side with different people. So some people were like, oh, I'm so ready to tell you the truth. And then other people were just like, oh, but they're my friend and I don't want to hurt their feelings and I don't want to lose their relationship, And so we're not really being the kind of friends that the Bible talks about when he says that friends are sticking closer than a brother and friends that wound us, can be trusted. So the ability to ask tough questions in love, and letter C, accountability relationships are relationships that accept our strengths and our weaknesses. And you and I have both of them, right? And we got lots of strengths, and we both have lots of weaknesses, and we don't always see them as clearly as what someone else sees them. And when I was a student here at Valley Forge, I got real involved with music when I first came, and I started playing drums in chapel and stuff right away, and then by my junior year or whatever, and this was, I know the school doesn't use as many student worship leaders as now, but back then it was students led worship every single chapel service, and so by my junior year I was leading worship in chapel at least once a month or whatever, and once a month, once a week. It was happening a lot, and it was fun. I really liked it, and it was kind of a natural fit for me at the time, and I just it was I felt comfortable on stage doing that kind of stuff, and so kind of had the persona of being a person on stage, but off stage I was really shy. I was just kind of a quiet, keep to myself kind of person, and some of you are probably like that too. How some of you are how many of you you walk through the hallways and you're just smiling and waving and saying hi to everybody that you see because that's just kind of the person that you are, right? Anybody like that? Some of you are like that. That doesn't surprise me with you because you travel all the time, so you got to do that, right? And then some of you are you just kind of keep to yourself, and if you don't know somebody, you just kind of put your head down and just keep right on walking, right? Anybody like that, and sometimes you're in the middle, right? And so I was I don't know you, you don't know me, the world's not going to end because we don't become good friends. You know what I mean? It doesn't really matter. But the problem was that everyone saw me on stage, and so they thought I was he's really nice and smiles on stage, but then off stage he's not. And so I didn't get pegged as being a shy person. I got pegged as being an arrogant person. Because like he don't talk to anybody, he doesn't hang out with anybody, he does the thing on, and then music and this and that, and then just whatever. And I literally would get hate mail in my student mailbox. I would like open up letters, and it would be like, "You're really good at leading worship, but you're the most arrogant person I've ever met in my entire life." And I'm like, oh, and it would just crush me. But what I didn't understand, and it took some friends to point it out to me, and actually took some people in churches after I graduated from school and I started get involved in churches. It took some people to help me realize that, like, Aaron, you have a weakness. And you're not doing it on purpose, but you have a weakness. You have a strength up here in public communication and all that kind of stuff. But one-on-one, you're really, really bad with people. Like, you don't pay attention to people. And it's probably not because you don't care about them. It's probably just because you're shy. But it comes across like you're arrogant and insensitive and you don't want to be friends with anybody. And so, like, it took somebody that I cared about and that I trusted to point that out to me and say, this is something that you need to work on. This is something that you have to work extra hard on. And we were having this little conversation before most of you got here in class tonight. We were talking about like junior high students versus senior high students, and I had asked Summer and I had asked Isaac, like which one do you like more? And most people are like, oh, I love junior hires. They just know that, or they I love senior hires. Very few people can't really figure it out. And then they hang out with them, and then they figure out like right away like which group of students they really like the most. I'm a senior high guy. Junior hires drive me crazy. I don't know what to talk about. Like, I don't know why you play Minecraft because it looks like Atari 2600 games. I don't even understand why you like that. And, but you're like addicted to, like, I don't have anything to relate to with you. Like, do I have any candy to give you? I don't know what to do. And I feel like a children's pastor. Like, you're a sixth grader, One of my senior high students walked into our youth ministry on Sunday morning and was like, dude, since when do third graders get to come to youth group? And he pointed to a sixth grader. I was like, no, he's not a third grader. He's like, he looks like it. I was like, you were that little when you came, But we were talking about how certain teenagers are, like you can connect really easy with certain teenagers, and then other teenagers you have a harder time connecting with. Thanks, man. And some people are really good at connecting with junior high students. I'm not. Some people are really, really good at connecting with kids that like come from broken families and just have they're just a troubled kid. Not that you want to label them that way, but they just have had a difficult, like go at it as a teenager. And some people are really good at connecting with those students, and I'm not. And but what I've learned is that doesn't mean that I shouldn't work hard at connecting with everyone. Junior high, sixth grade, troubled kid, who wants to dress goth and paint their nails black and wear a hoodie over there, like piercings all over the place. Not the kid that I'm really good at connecting with, but that doesn't mean I shouldn't have to work hard at connecting with it. And that was a major weakness for me. I had to learn, okay, you got to push yourself in that area. Just because you're not good at it doesn't mean that you don't have to try harder. And so, again, you need people in your life at a very intimate personal level and also from a ministry professional level to just point out to you and say, you know what, dude, you're not very good at that. You need to work on that. On my team at church, my staff at church, like I work really hard to have an environment where everyone's like, we just tell the truth. Boom, here it is, here it is, here it is. We love each other, but here's the truth. We need to work on this. This wasn't very good. That sermon point wasn't very good. You thought it was funny. It wasn't funny. It was really actually cheesy. And so you need people in your life that are going to do that. And I think about it like this. And for those of you that are athletes, you might connect with this illustration. But like, can you imagine? Just imagine, because none of us have probably ever been in this situation. But imagine the scrutiny that professional athletes go through. When you think about the position of a quarterback. You hear stories about like watching game film and coaches that are coaching you. And they literally take every single performance and they break it down play by play, and they do it in a room like this with a screen behind them, and they talk about the release and how they didn't step into the throw and how they missed this and they didn't read the defense right and everything like that. Now, can you imagine if we did that after every sermon that you preach and I preach? Just think about, can you imagine, like, if every time, let's talk about, this was just terrible, Aaron. This was absolutely terrible. You lost the whole crowd in this moment right here, and one, I don't know, I have thick enough skin to handle that, but I know this. if we actually did that in ministry, we'd be a whole lot better at reaching people than what we are right now. And that's where this whole idea of accountability comes in again, to say you need people in your life that are going to be able to love you enough and that you're going to trust enough to be able to look at you and say, wasn't your best day, wasn't your best performance, that wasn't really good. And so we all have strengths and weaknesses. You just have to decide whether you want to get better at your weaknesses and whether you want to allow people to help you with it. Because here's the truth about your weaknesses. You can't hide them. And when you go into the church world and you go in as a pastor, or those of you that aren't going into ministry, but you go into whatever professional field that you go into, within a couple months or a couple years minimum, everybody who works hand in hand with you, they're all going to know what your weaknesses are. They're all going to talk about them behind your back unless you encourage them to talk to you about it. So you just have to decide, do I want them to talk to me about it and help me become better? And help me overcome my weaknesses, and can I bring people around me that can be strong in areas that I'm weak? Or do I want people just to talk about it behind my back? They're going to talk about it one way or another. You just have to decide whether you want to be a part of the conversation or not. And so for me, I've just chosen to say, I want to try to be a part of the conversation because I know my weaknesses are probably going to be glaring and everyone's going to see them anyways. So I might as well just surround myself with people that I love and that I trust enough that they can come up to me and say, dude, that was really bad. You totally blew it. You offended that parent over there because of the way that you handled that situation. You completely ignored that kid. He said hi to you, and you walked right past him, and you didn't even acknowledge his presence there. You got to work on that kind of stuff. And I've literally tried to surround myself with people, and I still have the same weaknesses, and they're not gone. My weaknesses are still weaker than my strengths, but I know I'm more aware of them now, and so I get to work harder on them now, And I tell my people all the time, listen, when it's a youth service day, and all I'm thinking about is my sermon. And so if you see me just walking past people and walking past kids and not greeting them and not slowing down and not giving kids high fives and welcome them and look them in the eye and tell them that we're glad they're there, just pull me aside and remind me that I need to do that because I'm just so thinking about what I have to say. And you need people in your life like that. Last one here, letter D, under number 2. Accountable relationships are, they allow us freedom while caring about our decisions. So again, they're not controlling. And it's not somebody who's saying to you, I'm absolutely not going to allow you to do that. It's not a control freak. It's someone who's saying, listen, you got all the freedom in the world. You make whatever decisions that you want, but I care about you, and I care about your decisions, and I'm gonna help you, And when necessary, I'm gonna pull out my friend veto card and say, no, as your friend, I'm telling you, no, you can't do this. You can't date that girl. You can't see that guy. Whatever it is, I'm gonna help you out right now as your friend. But at the end of the day, we all have freedom. We all get to make choices, and so these aren't people that are going to control you and hold your hand and make the choices for you. You're going to have the freedom to do that, but they're going to love you through that whole thing. Number 3 here. Let's just talk for a couple minutes. Why is it important to have an accountability partner? Well, here's obviously where the whole idea of iron sharpens iron comes from. Proverbs 27:17 says, "As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another." One of my favorite quotes, it's not in your notes, but it is this right here. 5 years from now, you'll be the same person that you are today, with the exception of the places you go, the people you meet, and the books you read. Those are the things that are going to change your life. Places you go, people you meet, and the books you read. Other than that, 5 years from now, you're going to be the exact same person you are today. You might be a little taller, you might be a little heavier, you might have less hair, but you're going to be the same person on the inside unless you allow one of those 3 things or a combination of all of them to bring influence to your life. And obviously, your life and my life has been radically changed through the person of Jesus Christ. So obviously, we understand that relationship, at least we should. But through Jesus and his work in other people's lives, you have the opportunity to again, iron sharpens iron. It's one of the reasons I love to travel so much. It's one of the reasons I love to meet different people. It's one of the reasons I love to read, is because it's helping God have the opportunity to continue to form in me and allow me to become the person that he wants me to become. So what are some reasons why it's good to have an accountability partner? There's a whole bunch of stuff up on the screen. Letter A, sin loves secrecy and silence. Sin loves secrecy and silence, and kind of read a little bit of that in the Ted Haggart letter. Number 1 under there, Satan builds strongholds in our lives through our silence. When you're talking about what it is that you're wrestling with, when you're openly sharing, I'm dealing with this, I'm dealing with this, I'm dealing with this, your words and your freedom in talking are breaking down the opportunity for strongholds to be developed in your life. Strongholds are developed in your life in places of secrecy, in places of silence. Gail Haggard, the wife of Ted Haggard, says this: secrets are what empower sin. It's your secrets. It's your unwillingness or your inability to talk about it, to confess it, to share it, and not just to talk about it and confess it to God in the context of a prayer time or a journal or an altar time, but to talk about it with another person and to say, this is what's going on in my life, and this is what I'm wrestling with, and this is what's happening. 64% of pastors have no one to share their secrets with. Those of you that are planning on going into full-time ministry, will that be true of you? Will you allow yourself to be somebody who's going to be isolated and somebody who's going to be marginalized somewhere where you feel like I'm all alone, I'm all stuck alone, I have no one to talk to, I have no one to share some of my deepest struggles with? And obviously it can be hard in the church world because you have to be wise about who you talk to, and you can't just grab any parent in the youth ministry and say, hey, can I talk to you about what's going on in my life? You can't just grab any deacon or even another staff member. But you have to hold on to some relationships, maybe some relationships that you have here in school, maybe some relationships that you have back home, wherever you're from, where you can say, these are people that I can talk to. These are brothers that I can trust. These are sisters that I can trust, that I can share what's happening in my life. Another couple good quotes here. We are as sick as our secrets. And John Ortberg says, nothing makes temptation more powerful than isolation. When you're going through a season or a moment of temptation, and you're all by yourself, you're in trouble. You're in trouble. You're probably going to fail in those moments. Number 2 there under letter A, the enemy will try to isolate and separate so he can eventually dominate. Why is it important? Letter B, God has called us to be interdependent, not independent. He's called us to be interdependent, not independent. Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verses 9 and 10 says, 2 are better than one because they have a good return for their labor. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up. But pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up. And if you look at the statistics of the amount of pastors that drop out of ministry every single month, whether it's from moral failure or whether it's just burnout and stress, you'll find out that most of them feel like I'm all alone. I'm handling everything by myself. I'm trying to deal with all. I have no one to depend on. And I got to be honest with you, there's no reason for that. There's no excuse for that. And your generation of all generations, you guys have far too much technology that supposedly connects you together and supposedly makes your relationships better than any other generation has ever had. Your ability to connect with one another and social media and internet and email and all the technology in the world. And it affects all of us. And so like 2 weeks ago, I'm across the world on another continent in Africa, but I'm still able to grab an internet connection, Wi-Fi in a hotel, and Skype and see my family. So with all of this technology there, you would think that our relationships with one another would have grown to like unbelievable levels of depth and honesty and authenticity and transparency, but they don't. Unless you and I choose to say, I'm not going to try to be independent about my journey and my walk in faith with God. I'm not going to try to choose to be independent about being in ministry. I'm going to surround myself with people that are going to help me, whether they're 2 minutes away and just a drive down the road, or whether they're on the other side of the world. It doesn't matter anymore. You have the technology to keep you connected in that way. And so you have to make those choices to say, I'm going to have somebody in my life who's going to help me with that. Galatians chapter 6, verses 1 and 2 says, brothers and sisters, if someone is caught in a sin, you who live by the Spirit should restore that person gently, but watch yourselves, or you also may be tempted. Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you fulfill the law of Christ. So let's just break it down. Number 1 here, you got to refuse to walk alone. Find someone with the same chemistry that you connect with and has the same character of God in your life. Letter C here, why is it important to have an accountability partner? In order to do something of significance, you're going to need coaches and covenant companions who will hold you accountable. You're going to need coaches and companions. Proverbs 27, 5 and 6, better is an open rebuke than hidden love. Wounds from a friend can be trusted, but an enemy multiplies kisses. You need friends. You need coaches. You need people that are going to make you better. people that are going to push you, people that are going to challenge you, people that are going to point out your weaknesses and your strengths, and do it with a heart to say, I'm trying to make you better, I'm trying to help you, I'm trying to help you grow in all areas of your life. Letter D, freedom and forgiveness is found in friends in whom you can confide. James chapter 5, verse 16, therefore confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you may be healed. The prayer of a righteous person is powerful and effective. We have a hard time with confessing our sin, don't we? Someone said, amen. Yeah.
I think it's like I know it's something that I struggled with for a while. I think it would be not easier to confess, but I think also on the other side of the spectrum, including maybe ourselves, there's been a lack of people that say that you could confide in them,
right,
but there is no trust. I remember when I was a few years ago, I was working like hand in hand with a new idea of our district, and like me and him just became so close, and like we'd be driving for hours together, and just not purposely, we just became like started to confide in each other and just share things with each other, and look, this is going on, and it was just a really cool, awesome experience, and I definitely felt like I was being challenged. And I remember that then this opportunity arose within the district, and there was like different people that were like, I think Jonathan would be a perfect fit for it. And I had been praying with my dad. And, something that I had mentioned one day in a car ride, he brought it up, kind of like in a very weird and awkward way, and it made me lose like all trust in him like from that point forward.
right.
And I could think of times when I've done that to someone else. So I think it's like two sides of the thing. Like we have to be willing to confide in people, but also when people confide in us, kind of bite your tongue and pray about it, don't meditate on it. Like I don't know. I think there's those two sides of the
Yeah.
spectrum.
No, I think you're right, and I would add to that when I've been kind of saying this whole class, you and I have to choose if you want to have that kind of relationship, because it's not going to present itself to you. Because like if someone walks up to you and is like, "Hey, listen, I want to make you an offer, Donnie. I want to make you an offer. It's a great offer. Ready? I will allow you to be accountable to me. You can tell me all your junk. How's that sound?" You're going to be like, I'm good. No thanks. Awkward. Weird. And so no one's ever going to come to you and say, hey, I'd like to allow you to be accountable to me. I'll help you, And, quite honestly, very few people are going to approach you in life, if any, and say, hey, I'd love to be your coach. Hey, I'd love to be your mentor. It's going to happen. You know why? Because the best coaches and the best mentors are being constantly asked by people to be their coaches and men. They don't have time, so they're not looking for anybody else. And so the onus is on me. It's on you. To go out and say, I need a coach. I need a mentor. I need somebody who I can confide in, who I can trust. And that takes time. You don't just pick that person. You might just pick a coach. You might just be like, oh, that person's really good at this, and so I'm going to ask them to coach me and help me with this. You might pick a mentor that way because you might know, hey, that person's like, they're really great at public speaking, and I want to be great at that. So I'm going to go talk with them, get some experience from them, or take it. They're a really great athlete. They're really great at basketball, so I'm going to go have them coach me, or whatever. But when it comes to that issue of like someone to confide in, that takes time, and you have to cultivate that kind of relationship with somebody, and choose to say, I want to get to a point relationally where we can mutually trust one another enough that we want to have that kind of relationship. I'll tell you how it works for me as far as coaching and mentoring and stuff like that goes. I believe, and I mentioned this last week when we were doing the interview with Chili, you're going to need multiple coaches in multiple areas for multiple seasons of your life. So most of you right now are in a young adult season of your life. Most of you are single. Some of you are engaged. I don't think any of you are married yet. But so that's the season of life that you're in right now. You won't always be in that season of your life. That's going to change for you at some point. So you might need coaches right now that are going to help you with things like, hey, how do I know? How do I go through an interview process at church? I'm looking at these different interviews. You might want someone to coach you through that. You might need someone who's going to coach you to discover what your real calling is and what the next step for you is. You might want someone to coach you in a relationship that's gotten really serious and now you're thinking about marriage or whatever. you know, you're going to eventually go through that season, and now you're going to be married, and so you might need someone now to coach you, and like, okay, I need someone to coach me in marriage, you know, like I thought I could figure this out, it was going to be easy, but wow, it's a lot harder than what I thought it was going to be, so I need someone to help me with that. Eventually you're going to have kids. Man, I need someone to coach me like how to be a great parent. For me and my wife, the way that coaching has always worked is we will recognize, we'll see somebody who does something in a certain area extremely well, and we just are kind of like, wow, they are so gifted at whatever it is. And we'll be like, you know what? We should get to know them. Like we should have them over for dinner. We should ask them questions about that. You know, because we've noticed something in them. We're like, oh, I want that person to coach me. You know, and that's how it's always worked. And it's always us pursuing someone else. And very few times are you gonna have a coach who pursues you. You're gonna have to go after that person and say, help me. Help me figure this out. You know, help me walk through this. And the same thing is true when it comes to an accountability partner. Now you're gonna find somebody to be your ISI partner because it's a part of your grade, and it's like, okay, I got to do this, and it's great. And my prayer and hope for you is that it's not just somebody who's like, yeah, we got through it. I got my 10 sheets filled out. Whew, okay, done with that. But the hope and prayer is that person is somebody that you develop some serious authenticity with, and that for you, maybe that relationship lasts for years after you both have graduated from college and gone your own ways. But it's always going to be on you to decide, whether I want to do it or not. Here's some different accountability meeting models. I'm going to kind of fly through these real quick. These are just different things you can do in the context of meeting with somebody who you call your accountability partner or who you call your ISI partner. And so these are just different ones that I found, and they're acronyms and different things like that. So one's called the SOAP method, little acrostic there. Scripture memorization, meditation. You can hold one another accountable for spending time in the Word on a regular basis. And what scriptures are you meditating on? What scriptures are you memorizing? The letter O would be others. Hold one another accountable for serving family, for friends, for the lost. I found just what are the other people that you're thinking about, that you're praying about, that you're serving, that you're working through. Letter A is accountability. Holding one another accountable for personal disciplines. Are you spending time worshiping, exercising? Eating healthy, time management. Potential pitfalls, your thought life, the things you watch, things that you participate in, look at, and things like that. So that's just the accountability aspect of like just being honest and real about stuff. And the goal of being accountable to someone is to set up safeguards against sin. It's so that you have someone who's not just coaching you in those areas, but it's also somebody that they're going to ask you tough questions, and so it gives you more motivation to stay on the straight and narrow path. And then the last one in this little method here is prayer requests. So the letter P, prayer requests. So invest part of the time you spend together praying for one another's needs, and just, what are your prayer requests? What are the things? Keeping a list of prayer requests and being able to celebrate the requests that have been answered, and continue to pray for the requests that that you're still believing God for. So that's one way you can do it. Here's another way. You can choose what they call the priority model, and these are just a bunch of different words that kind of fit under the letter P. So A is the place. And these are the questions that would go along with it. Are you spending time in the secret place? Matthew 6:6. When you pray, go to a secret room, close the door. Then your Father in heaven sees what you do in secret and will reward you. So we'll start with that. Place, discuss the things the Lord has been revealing to you during your quiet time, sharing from your journal, parts that you want to share with one another. The next word would be priorities. And the questions that would go with that is, are your priorities in the proper place? God, family, church, work, hobbies, etc. The second question would be, are you investing and spending or stealing time? Are you stealing time from God and spending it with friends, or are you stealing time from your studies in order, to socialize? And so it's just the question of priorities. Are your priorities where they need to be? The next P word would be pitfalls. Questions that would go with that is, how are you handling your hell baits? And that's just another way of saying hell baits are just custom-made sin patterns that are designed just for you. And that might not be a phrase that you're familiar with, but I just think of it. Again, there's an enemy of your soul. He understands what your weaknesses are. He understands what your temptations are, and he's going to try to tempt you in those areas. So if for some of you in the room, there's just absolutely no temptation at all to leave class tonight and go to a bar and get drunk. It's just like so far removed from who you are as a person that it would be pointless for the devil to spend any energy trying to tempt you to do so. But for someone else, that's a huge deal because of the background they've come out of and because of sin that they've already been free. So the things that you wrestle with in your life, you wrestle with them for a reason. One, because you have a weakness in that area, and two, the enemy knows you have a weakness in that area, and so he constantly is trying to bring those issues back into your world and back into your life. I call them hell baits, things that are custom designed just for you. It's the bait of hell that just works for you. So if I want to catch a certain kinds of fish, I use a certain kind of bait, right? And so, in the same way, the devil has things that are prepared just for you, and just for myself. Number 2, under pitfalls, reducing your readiness to sin. So identifying your unique and reoccurring scenarios that create opportunities for the enemy to attack. Modifying your behavior boundaries for those predictable increases in your readiness to sin. Alerting your accountability partner to opportune moments that are predictable and repeatable. Cultivating a prayer team that is proportionate with your platform of influence. Let me talk about just a couple of those. I won't talk about all of them. But I had a student years ago who was wrestling with pornography and finally got to the point that he was honest enough to talk to me about it. And so in my conversation with him, one of the things that we discovered was that when he would go home from school, he was home by himself from like 3:30 when he got home until about 6:30 or 7 o'clock at night, until his older sisters got home from work, until his parents got home from work. So he had all this time, like 3 or 4 hours every single day of total isolation. And so when we started talking about time frames during the day when he would fail most in this area of his life, they always fell during that time frame. And he never realized it until I started asking him questions about it. And then I just started to point out to him, you realize that, like, if you can just change the pattern of your schedule, if you go get yourself a job after school, or if you came to church and interned, or if you stayed at school afterwards and did something, you would greatly reduce the opportunity, and therefore you would help put yourself in a position where you have more strength to resist the temptation that you're going through. And so sometimes when we talk about like hell baits, and you talk about readiness to sin, and you talk about modifying behavior boundaries, that's just an example of what I'm talking about. And see, you and I need to do that for ourselves as well. And you need someone to help you do that. Sometimes you need someone to help you discover, man, well, do you realize that like what you're telling me, every time that this happens in your life, it always happens from this time to this time. Or it always happens in this place. Or it always happens when you're by yourself. And so sometimes you have to look at those things and then all of a sudden just realize there's a pattern in my life, and that pattern is leading me to a continual weakness, and it's becoming cyclical. So the pattern just leads me back into it, and leads me back into it, and leads me back into it. And every once in a while, God shows up in a big way. I have a God moment. The pattern breaks, and it's like an emotional moment maybe in my life, or, an altar call or a response or something significant that happens on a retreat or a class or some setting where we say, oh, I'm never going to do that again. I'm never going to do that again. I'm never going to do that again. But we go back to that same pattern of living. And the pattern isn't what's sinful, but the pattern allows weakness to enter into our life and allows us to be more prone to sin. Does that make sense, what I'm saying? And you need to understand that about your own life, and you need to start thinking about some of your weaknesses and thinking about some of your hell baits and some of the areas where you fail at, whatever they are, whether they're very significant things that you're going through right now that you're kind of hiding from everyone around you, and it's really easy to do that. There's no way I'm going to know. There's no way half the people in the class are going to know. Or whether they're little things that you're wrestling with that you realize could potentially turn into bigger things, right? Look at the pattern. Look for that. Look for the pattern. When does it happen? Where does it happen? Who are you with? Are you by yourself? Or are you always with a certain group of friends? Look at the pattern. And then make changes to the behavior pattern. Don't just make a mental decision and say, oh, I'm going to be different from now on. Make changes to the behavior pattern, right? And say, I got to change this behavior. I need to go to bed at a different time, or I need to not be here at this time, or I need to change that up. So move on here. A couple more under this category, and then we'll just talk about a bunch of questions that you can use. Letter D is people. Are you focused on serving or being served? And great question there. Just Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and give his life as a ransom for many. You live your life differently when you live it for other people. And so one of the things you can do is discuss, who are you serving? Who are the spiritual authorities in your life that you're serving? Discuss ways that you can help, the people that you're serving. And then I think this is the last one here under this category here. It's two more. Praise. Letter E, praise. Share your personal praise reports. And then letter F, prayer. That's the last one. Exchange prayer requests. Invest part of your time together in prayer. So those are two different models. SOAP model kind of walks you through a little pattern there. Priority model just gives you 6 different words that you can use. They're both very similar, just different ways to break it down. You might hate both of those. I don't care. It doesn't matter. I'm just giving you options, okay? Here's another option, right? This is just plain and simple. Question model. Just ask each other questions, See, you might need some of those other models because you might need to have time to get to know one another. And so you can get to know one another by asking some of those more generic questions like, hey, what are some prayer requests? Or hey, what do you think of God for today? Or hey, all this kind of stuff. If you already have a really close, authentic relationship with somebody, you might just have a list of questions that you prefer to get together and ask yourself a list of questions. Okay, so if you need questions, I got questions for you. All right, there's a bunch of them in your notes. I'm not going to read all of them to you. We're like 5 minutes from a break here. But here's a couple of questions, and I'll just point out some of the ones that I like. I like the Andy Stanley's accountable question. What is it that I'm secretly doing that is not outright sin, but I hope no one finds out about it? Great question. Great preventative question. Because we all have those little things that we do that we're like, yeah, it's not like totally sin. It's kind of in the gray area, but I don't really want anyone to know about it. Always a dangerous thing. Always a slippery slope. Always a little bit of bait that's kind of leading us the wrong direction. Here's a bunch of other questions, and I'm going to put them up on the screen, and you got them in your notes, so you can kind of just read through them. So we'll look at these a section at a time, and you just read them at your own speed. You can read them on the screen and read them on the notes in front of you. But what I want you to do, I'm just going to ask you which ones you like the most and why, and so I'll give you a couple seconds to kind of read through all of those ones. These are John Wesley's small group questions that they would ask in their small. Take a minute, read them, and then we'll just kind of pick out the ones that we like the most. All right, shout out which ones that you like the most. Which ones just hit you for some reason? You're just kind of like, oh, that's a great question. There's 21 of them there. Am I enjoying prayer? Great question. What I want you to do personally as you read a question or hear someone else talk about a question that you really like, just highlight it. Just use your highlight tool in your Word doc or whatever. Highlight it because it's easy for you to come back to it later then and be like, oh, this might be a question that I want to use in my, with my ISI partner. So am I enjoying prayer? Great question. Someone else. How do I spend my spare time? It can be really telling of a person's priorities and, kind of lifestyle that they're living. Yep, my slave to any of those things. Yep. There's like John Wesley's questions too says like they use words that we don't really use. Like the word slave isn't really a word that we use in that way, but we can be very easily become a slave to those things. One more, and then we'll move on to the next set. Yeah, great question. All right, so hopefully you highlighted like 1 or 2 there in that session, and then John Wesley also had these a smaller set of questions. He had a thing that he called band meeting, and I gotta be honest, I'm not exactly sure of like the total difference between all of those things, but here's a couple of those questions. There might be some in there that you like, kind of jump out at you. So here's another just another resource, just more questions. Chuck Swindoll's pastoral accountability questions. So these are more focused on pastors and helping them be accountable in areas that are common pitfalls for ministers. So look at these 7 questions. All right, go on to another section. I'm going to ask you to pick a couple questions out of this one. I like these ones a lot personally. Wayne Benson's accountability questions. I don't know if you know who Wayne Benson is. Was the pastor at Grand Rapids, Michigan for years, and then was the president at Central Bible College for several years as well. But great minister. So there's his top 10 accountability questions on the screen and in front of you. Just shout out a couple that you like. Highlight them in your notes there so you can get to them easily. What do you see? What's that? Yeah, the last question is great. You just asked me 9 really hard questions. Now I'm going to find out if you're lying to me. I like number 8. Have you secretly wished for another's misfortune so that you might excel? Yep. All right, we'll go through one more set here, and then I'll just explain the last Willie Large set. We're not, going to go through them all. And obviously, again, I'm just giving this to you all as a resource. I'm just doing the work for you. This is just all stuff that I found going online and just doing some research. But I know you're not going to use all of these, in your accountability meetings with your ISI partner. It's just impossible. You'd be like meeting for hours. Stop asking me questions. We're shining white lights in people's faces in dark rooms and stuff like that. So read through these 15. This is from Ed Stenser. Read through these and just yell out any that you think are really great, and then just explain how the next set works, and then give you a break. Did the Bible live in me today? That's a great one. And you'll see, obviously, there's some similarities there. So obviously, people are kind of share some list of questions and everything like that. The last session there is like they're all broken up into like major sections, and I just thought this was interesting because, like if you look through this, scroll down, there's like how many? 10, 11 different sessions there. So just a random thought for you. Like some of you, if you want to, if you want to try this, like since you need to meet 10 times with an ISI partner for this class, maybe you take session 1, relationship with God, and those are your accountability questions for your first session. And then when you guys get together for the second time, you take, okay, let's talk about family relationships and just ask questions in those areas. So obviously a lot more thorough, but it'll drive down a little bit deeper in specific areas of your life, and it might help reveal some things that are going on in you that you just have never really been able to verbalize until someone asks you, all the different questions that kind of help, bring those things out. I like questions. Questions make me think. Questions make me squirm a little bit inside. I have to choose whether I'm going to be totally honest or whether I'm going to kind of, fudge my way through stuff. I find that when people ask me difficult questions, it gives me an opportunity to share things that I wouldn't normally just come right out and share. And it helps me to just kind of peel away another layer, And questions are just kind of like peeling an onion almost, where it's just one little layer at a time, but it helps me get all the way to the core of what it is that I'm really wrestling with. I like journaling for the same reason. We talked about that last week, but I like to just be able to sit there and journal and write and journal and write and journal and write and read back over what I just read and then be like, oh, that's it. It took me a little bit of time to process and to write that out, but now I finally realize what it really is that I'm wrestling with, or what it took me a little bit to identify what that emotion really was that I'm really wrestling with, but now I can see it a lot more clearly. So questions help me do that, and journaling helps me do that, right? So take a break. I'll have our friend via Skype. His name is Jimmy Rollins, Pastor Jimmy Rollins. He's from Maryland, and so he's going to join us via Skype. We'll talk about accountability and family and life and ministry and all that kind of good stuff. So take a break.